Hi, listeners. This is Chris Batts, your host of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I have a couple of announcements. So first off, I just want to apologize for the 2-month delay in the podcast. It's been a rather busy time for the legal recruiting business, but rest assured I'll be getting more episodes up. And that leads to announcement number 2. Season 1 is about to wrap up. I want to say thank you to everyone who has been a loyal listener from the start, or if this is your first listen. You are the reason why I do this. Never stop growing. Never stop challenging yourself. Always be learning from others. Thank you for honoring these legal executives, these men and women who bless us with their life, their story, and their insights. In regards to the next episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Jordan Furlong of Law21. Many of you know him for his Twitter account and his blog where he shares insights on the global legal industry. So in talking with Jordan, we touched on several subjects, a few of which I'll mention: his legal career, innovative things law firms are doing, non-attorney ownership, geopolitics, law school reform, and what young attorneys are facing, and much more, including who he follows on Twitter, who he reads, and some more personal subjects for him in his family life. So there's lots to take away for everyone in this episode. Just a reminder, the PDF transcript of this audio is available to download. Go to liongrouprerecruiting.com/podcast. As many of you know, we interview corporate defense, law firm leaders, partners, general counsels, and legal consultants. You're listening to episode 28 of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast.
Broadcasting from Kansas City, this is the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. In each episode, you'll receive actionable ideas and hear personal leadership stories of the top corporate defense law firms from around the United States. Enjoy a front row seat with law firm leaders, their partners, and legal consultants as we discuss life and leadership.
Welcome to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Batts with the Lion Group. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Jordan Furlong, principal at Law21. Jordan is a leading analyst and consultant on the global legal market and forecaster of its future development. He's well known for his legal industry blog, Law21, and speaks to numerous legal organizations, including law firms, lawyer organizations, and legal regulators, but not limited to, throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. Jordan has a Canadian law degree from Queen's University Faculty of Law in 1993 and was fully licensed in 1995. Welcome, Jordan, to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's great to be here today.
So, Jordan, I have to be honest, I'm a fan of your content and your activity on LinkedIn, and I like the questions you ask. And, beginning this process of teeing you up to have a podcast episode with you, I did some research and I noticed that you were a qualified attorney in Canada. Tell my listeners a little bit about your journey. So is it correct you went to undergrad for English and then you went to law school?
That's right, yeah. And having finished my English literature degree and found an astonishing lack of interest in industry to to hiring someone with that qualification, wound up going to law school, which I really enjoyed, and wound up at a large firm in Toronto. And here in Canada, there's like an articling year. It's kind of like an apprenticeship year you have to serve before you can be called to the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was really interesting. And at the end of the year, the firm declined to hire me back as an associate, which is one of those things which at the time seemed really terrible. Right. And in retrospect,
this is a blessing.
Just the best. Exactly. So from there, I kind of wandered into legal journalism. I spent a short period of time writing for a legal newspaper, and then I guess over the course of the next 10 years, I wound up being the editor of 3 different legal periodicals, newspapers, and magazines here in Canada, which was really interesting and a great new and different perspective on the market from what I had before.
That's amazing. And you won awards because you're the editor of these publications. Now, it's the Lawyers Weekly, National, and Canadian Corporate Counsel Association magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the 3.
Now, what gave you the idea to strike out on your own and do Law21? What was that transition like for you to do this?
It was a gradual process by which I kind of figured I had so many things I wanted to say about the business of law and the market for legal services. And I found that I couldn't really do it in my current position. And there actually was a bit of a crystallizing anecdote that goes with this. Around halfway through my tenure as editor at the magazine, which was a magazine for the Canadian Bar Association, it was like the ABA Journal of Canada. And we did a cover story on the breakdown in the family court system and how family law is just not working. And I got a little worked up about it. And I wrote an editorial which said, it's time for us to get ready for the post-lawyer justice system because we are going to lose our position in this market because we're not serving people's interests. Well, this gets picked up by the national news and runs in several papers.
Oh, wow.
Lawyers Association editor says lawyers are terrible. So I got called into the executive director's office, and full credit to him, he did not actually fire me. So bless him for that. But he did suggest that maybe I should find another outlet for my opinions on the matter, and that's kind of what led to the blog. I said I have all these things I want to say. I don't know if they're right or not. I think they are, but I need a place to say them outside of the confines of any official representative capacity, and that's kind of how it all started.
And you became an entrepreneur.
I did, and that was a funny thing because after several years of writing at the blog, people would call up every so often and say, "Hey, look, we're having a conference or a panel. Would you want to come and speak at it?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, sure, be happy to." "Well, thanks very much." And they say, "How much do you charge?" I thought, "Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that was a thing," and it turns out it is, and that's kind of what I've been doing ever since. So I spend my time kind of split between writing as much as I possibly can about the market and making as many observations and just trying to learn all the time what's going on because it's like a kaleidoscope out there. It's constantly changing. And then I speak to, as you said, law firms and legal organizations, and I basically say, look, this is what's happened to the market that we all thought we knew really well. Right. And this is why it's happened. This is why it's going to keep on happening. And this is what I would strongly recommend that you do in your situation, whatever it happens to be. So I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to do it, and I just love it tremendously. And it seems to have some value to people. So yeah.
Tell my listeners about the new book you just released. Give us a little bit of an understanding of it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, it's called Law is a Buyer's Market. And full disclosure, it's not really, no, but it's getting there really fast. Yeah. And I wrote it, it's funny how time flies because I sort of sat here and I thought, my gosh, it's actually been a couple of years now since it came out. And the book in a way is kind of a distillation of what I might say in a presentation. So about the first 40% of it is a brief history of change in the market and the forces behind it. It's an exploration of all the ways in which the traditional law firm model, for all its merits, and it was a fine model in its day, just isn't really working anymore. It's not suited for this environment. And then the balance of it is, as I say in the subtitle, building a client-first law firm. So if you were to reconstruct a law firm along the lines of a more aggressive market, a more competitive market, a more technologically advanced market, what would that look like? Which I think, frankly, is a question every managing partner should be asking him or herself these days. This was my answer to it. This is what I think it should look like, and I think this is how you could get there to make it.
That's exciting. Just for listeners to know that there's a link to that book on the blog post site. Let's jump into a couple different subjects, and we're going to kind of do rapid fire. Give me ideas as far as your perspectives, because all this stuff is hitting the news wire in different ways. So what is your perspective? Now, you being in Canada, but also having the 50,000 foot view that people pay to listen to you or to read your content. So in American Lawyer just published their new magazine with front title talking about our big law firms sleeping while the big four accounting firms are encroaching. What's your opinion about that?
I think the big four accounting firms, and one of the issues we have is that we keep calling them accounting firms, and they're really not. Yeah. In a way, I mean, they are, but that's only one aspect of what they do. What they really are these massive business consulting conglomerates. And I have to remind audiences when I'm talking every so often just how big they are. I said, look, the smallest of the big four, KPMG, has 130,000 employees.
Right.
These are just monoliths. And they are absolutely interested in the legal market, but not in a way I think that most lawyers tend to view it. And I just saw a piece the other day that asked the question, are law firms under attack by the big four? And I made a brief note about this, and I said, no, I don't think so, because that misconstrues what they're doing. The big four are not lining up big law firms in their sights and ready to take us down. It's not this huge battle royale between big four and law firms. the big four are concerned with each other, right? They are battling each other for market share, for prominence, for various industries and so forth. And what they are absolutely focused on are their clients' business concerns and business issues, of which they are manifold, obviously.
Yep.
But among those are issues of risk management and issues of regulatory compliance and other areas that it so happens law firms are currently doing.
Yep.
So what I said was the big four are not, they're not attacking law firms. Their impact on us is almost inadvertent, right? They want this field of business consulting. They want to own the entire area of providing the consulting and advisory and strategic services that large clients need. We just happen to be the unfortunate position of being the smaller entities in that field. It's not personal, it's just business. And I do think they are going to, they're going to continue to zero in on this field. And I think there is a serious risk for law firms of losing not all market share, obviously, maybe not even a significant amount, but enough that it's going to hurt and enough that it's going to be a new competitive entity to take into account and to try to differentiate ourselves against.
And do you see them? So, was it PwC created a foreign legal services entity? They're all kind of doing their thing. I think E&Y is the last one that hasn't made a major announcement yet. But how are they going to take business from domestic U.S. law firms? Is it going to be actually domestic business lost, or is it more international business lost?
I think it will certainly start on the international side, and I think you're absolutely right. All four of them are in their own way in on this. Even E&Y very recently acquired a kind of a new style law firm in Great Britain called Riverview. Yeah.
Yep.
And they're locking and loading for this battle. They are absolutely in this to win it. But you're right. They cannot at the moment compete directly with U.S. law firms and for business in the U.S. when it's in terms of straight legal services. Now, there's two aspects of that. The first is that hinges entirely on the regulatory ban on non-lawyer ownership of the legal service deliveries, which we can talk about later, if you like. I think that's the clock ticking on that. But secondly, you're in Kansas City, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay. If I'm running a 40 or 50 lawyer law firm in Kansas City, and I'm dealing with maybe a couple of major local manufacturers, maybe a national company or something like this, and maybe a lot of local entrepreneurs and so forth. I'm not concerned about the big four, nor should I be, because that's not their client base.
Right.
So I think a number of lawyers who look up at this and say, should we be concerned? I'd say, not really. I would be concerned only insofar as any major new competitor coming into the market, if it has an impact, it's going to do something, no matter if they're in your backyard or not, no matter if they're looking for your clients or not, they're going to change client expectations about what's possible in legal service delivery, and that will affect everybody.
Yep. We haven't heard much about Axiom these days, but they were the big name a couple of years ago everyone was fretting about.
Absolutely. Axiom continues to be a really, really interesting company because, as you know, they started out life as I don't want to say a flex lawyer platform alone, but that was a lot of what they were interested in, right? They kind of said, get Wall Street lawyers at, Midwest prices or something like this. I don't know exactly what their tag was. I don't even know what their rates were. But that was their whole idea. We will give you disaggregated, discounted, high-quality associate work. And I think they kind of figured out pretty quickly the margins on that. You hit the ceiling on that pretty fast.
Yep.
So I think what's been interesting is to see them morph into what is really a managed legal services provider and taking like whole chains and chunks of work and really investing in technology and project improvement, project management, and so forth. And I saw a stat the other day. I don't have it to hand, but some not insignificant percentage of their income now comes entirely from fully automated contract analysis work for large companies around the world. And you're right. We haven't really heard much from them. That could be, of course, one of two things. Either things aren't going well for them and they want to keep it themselves, or things are going extremely well for them. And
they don't want anyone to know.
Exactly. So either way, the silence is not something that should give law firms a whole lot of confidence. But Axiom is, they're just one. You look at a company like United Lex, which is probably the noisier of these major companies right now, or a company like Elevate, really interesting company. And I'm going to make sure now I've got this right. I think Elevate recently acquired a company called LexPredict, which is very advanced thinking in terms of machine learning and AI for legal services. So there's so much action going on all around the periphery of law firms. And most law firms, understandably enough, aren't really aware of this because they're focused on their business. But the competition absolutely is intensifying out there.
Yeah. So one of the consequences, intended or unintended, is consolidation. I mean, it's happening on a massive scale across the country and around the world. Can you get a little predictive for me? What do you anticipate in the next 5 to 10 years in regards to what we see as, the Canadian market, the US market, even so much as European or UK, and the number of firms? There's always going to be lots of law firms. People can spin off. They can start their own firms. There's that sort of world. But this notion of the Law 200 and so forth.
I do think that amongst what you would call, the Law 200, the NLJ 250, that handful of firms, because really, as you know, there's tens of thousands of law firms in the United States, but most of them are solos or very small practices.
Yep.
But amongst the largest firms in the U.S., and we'll stick with the U.S. for now because Canada is a very small market comparatively, I do think there's going to be a significant consolidation of what you would call full service, either national or at the very least multi-jurisdictional, multi-office law firms. And it'll happen for a couple of reasons. And the first reason is the one that we're the most familiar with, which is that law firms seek growth. They want to increase their market share. They want more revenue coming in. And so they look for ways to bring in more offerings and deeper benches and so on and so forth. Now, I personally don't happen to think that's the best way for a law firm to achieve growth.
Right.
I think just simply bringing in more lawyers doesn't really change the game for you. I think what you always want to be doing is, either really increasing percentage of market share or more likely increasing your margins and getting higher profitability, which is not achieved by just adding lawyers. But, sidebar that.
So when you say significant consolidation, can you put numbers? Can you give us some kind of prediction of what that could look like? I've heard about the hollow, Law 150, sub 50 firms. Help us understand a little bit.
Okay, here's my guess. Maybe 10, 15 years down the road, we're not going to be talking about an Law 200. I doubt we'll be talking much beyond like an Law 75. And to be honest, I'm not sure there'll be an Law, right? All of respect to my friends at American Lawyer who do a great job. But the whole Law thing, it's a brand, right? It's this brand around really large firms full of lawyers. And even the nature of law firms themselves is going to change over the course of the next decade and a half. Yeah. We're going to see more people who aren't lawyers coming into law firms, delivering services to clients, taking equity stakes in law firms. And our model of what we think those law firms look like is going to change. But in the interim, I do think, we're going to get to a point where there's going to be in the range of 50, 75, maybe 100 maximum firms in the country that are of a significant enough size that we say they're large enough or global enough that they have the kind of coverage that those of us interested in global commercial law are focused on. I think if you go as far as 20, 25 years down the road, you're probably looking 50 to 75 absolute max. But again, that's going to be, some holdovers from today. You can pick whatever firms you want. There's going to be big four or whatever spun out of those. Mm-hmm. But there's going to be firms that came out of China. There's going to be firms that came out of India. There's going to be firms coming out of countries you don't see right now as being global players. So we're going to see consolidation. It's not going to be linear and it's not going to be unending. We're going to see a point at which we don't just see the consolidation of firms, we see the transformation of firms.
That's good.
And I should hang one more idea on that, and that is the other aspect of consolidation, which I think is going to really come into play over the next 5 years or so, is what my friend Edwin Reeser out in California, and I give him credit for coining the idea, basically liquidating mergers. Because you're going to see a bunch of firms. You see this, of course, all the time. I'm sure firms of any size that have just come to the end of their road. Right? The succession plan didn't work if they even had one. The older partners are checking out. There's nothing really underneath them. And the firm needs an exit strategy. And along comes this behemoth from, New York or from London or from Shanghai or wherever it comes from and says, we will give you a nice parachuted face-saving exit. We will just gobble up all the parts of your firm that we care about. We'll do a press release and everybody goes home as happy as they can be. I think that's going to drive a lot of consolidation too.
Yeah, I have to agree. Let's nosedive into AI. Help my listeners see what you have seen and what is the most emerging tech. Now, there's all kinds of tech and things are getting more efficient and effective, but can you take this further down the line again for us and say, where is this all really headed?
I can take it so far down the road. I can't take it all the way just because I don't think anybody knows. Yeah. If you go stretch off, someone says to me, what does legal AI look like in 25 years? I said, I have no clue. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess. I do know that everything we hear about legal AI and machine learning and legal services and so forth, 95% of it is hype. It's clickbait stuff. I have a rule of thumb. If the article you're reading includes the term robot lawyers and it's not in air quotes, then don't mind it, because it's a nonsensical idea. Where we're going to see AI, I think, at least in the short term, which is again the next decade or so, have an impact is the increasing frequency of, and again, this is a phrase I'll give the credit here to the folks at 3 Geeks and a Law blog, which, by the way, is a fantastic blog, which I recommend, which is, this is not about lawyers being replaced by AI. It's about lawyers being augmented by AI. It's a very fine-tuned, highly effective technological tool, but at the end of the day, it's just a tool. And I said about a year or so ago in a post I wrote about this, I said, the sooner AI becomes boring, the better off we're all going to be. Because if we just realize, you know what, it's just tech, right? It's just a tool. The telephone was a tool. The inkwell was a tool. We'll get used to this one as well. The main thing that machine learning, I think, is probably going to do, though, again, the very short term, it's going to accelerate this process of disaggregating work away from law firms, and especially away from junior and entry-level associates in law firms, because the kind of work that people like that did, and I did it, and you did, and everybody who's ever worked in a law firm has done that work, the document review and the due diligence and the contract analysis and so forth, and basic legal research. That work is going into software. It's going into these managed legal services companies. Some of it's getting sucked right back into the client itself. And the machine, the ability of technology to perform to a certain extent tasks that previously only people could do, it is going to, in the fullness of time, decimate the ranks of what we would have once considered the associate class of law firms. And I think that's going to have a profound impact on not just the nature of firms themselves, but on their profit structures, eventually on their compensation and billing systems. So it will have a deep impact, but it's going to take a while for it to, I think, really flow all the way through the ecosystem.
That's excellent. Well, I appreciate that. So you had alluded, and we were going to talk later about non-attorney ownership. Here's a question that I hinted to you earlier, and I am excited to talk about it. Now, I want you to put your investor hat on for a moment for me, Jordan. And here's the question. Here's the scenario. If you are a non-attorney investor and you had a large pile of cash to invest in a law firm, where would you spend it to get the greatest return? And what would be your investment horizon? So assuming you could do that in the United States, assuming the ABA, put down their guard and all the states adopted non-attorney ownership, and you are now a private equity or venture capitalist, and maybe you're a private investor, so you don't have to deal with your own investors to relate to, but you want your return. Where would you put that money? What would you do, Jordan?
That's a great question. There are so many law firms out there that I like and that I admire. They're doing really interesting work, great lawyers, very effective client relationships, and so forth. I can't think of a single law firm anywhere that I would invest money in as an outside investor. And the reason is these firms are not set up to be in investment vehicles, right? They're not even businesses in the way that we understand them. They are platforms for the generation of annual profits and on a short-term basis as possible of the lawyers who also happen to be equity partners. They have no assets other than the people who come to work every day and the work in progress that hangs around there. And that's it, right? So, and they are immensely difficult to manage. Their own managing partners, can't handle it. They're extremely difficult to deal with. And I would not put money into any of them because I'm thinking, where's my profit going to come from? The only way I'm going to get profit serious profit, the kind of thing that will actually make an investor, a venture capital firm, sit up and take notice. The levels of profit margin I would need to establish in a law firm, I would start by doing, but one of the impacts was I would cut at least half the lawyer workforce. Okay. And there is no way that's going to happen while lawyers are also the equity partners in the firm. So, wouldn't be a law firm. Where would it be? It would be one of two areas. The first is I would be very interested in any business, I don't care if it's Big Four, I don't care if it's a startup, but any business that is looking hard now into the whole issue of contracts, how they are drafted, how they are designed, how they are managed, the contract analysis. And there are very good established companies right now in this area. I'll wave my Canadian maple leaf flag for a moment and talk about Kira Systems based out of Toronto, which I think right now is probably the leading technology company in this area. And there's tremendous potential there. And not just for massive companies, but for, again, entrepreneurs and small businesses and your local restaurant and landscaping company. Everybody has contracts. Nobody knows what they say. Yep. Nobody pays attention to them unless there's a crisis. So the management and consolidation and extraction of useful data out of contracts, I think that would be immensely interesting. And the second area I would be investing in is the latent or untapped or invisible market, especially on consumer side. And this is why, by the way, you see LegalZoom raking in something like, what, $500 million the other day in outside investment, because people look at that market and say, this is almost pristine. Lawyers don't want this, right? Lawyers could not be any clearer that unless you can provide them with a certain amount of money per hour, they will not serve your legal needs, right? That is the one outstanding lesson of the last half century of law firm development. And yet, hundreds of millions of Americans, tens of millions of Canadians, you name any country, are absolutely without access to needed services, and there is a value to that. If you can unlock that, and I believe it is unlockable, that's as much of a greenfield as you could ask for in the legal services industry.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. So I'm going to now take you and we're going to pivot or juxtapose to education. If you had the power, and Jordan, I kinged you, head dean over all law schools of law schools.
I love this call. This is great. I got all these awesome jobs. Great.
What would you do? What kind of law school reforms would you bring, knowing that you care for your students and want a healthy future for them?
In a way, if we'd had this conversation even like 5 or 7 years ago, I might have said, well, then let's talk about science fiction. Let's talk about, creating a law school of which there's no trace today. And I want to preface my thoughts by saying there are a bunch of law schools now in the U.S. and Canada and Britain that really are making a serious commitment to doing things differently. Again, I can rattle off a few at the top of my head. I'm going to miss a bunch, of course, by doing so. But you look at what Suffolk Law School in Boston's doing. You look at Vanderbilt, Northwestern in Chicago, University of Indiana under Bill Henderson and the leadership there. And there's at least a dozen or two more that just weren't around. And they're not just adding courses in practice management, right? They're not even just adding courses in, again, contract analysis or the client side of things. They're starting to fundamentally re-envision what the purpose of the school is. Yeah. Because most law schools today, and all law schools historically, have considered their role to be credentialing. And that's basically it, right? You come here, you pay a huge amount of tuition, and at the end, we give you a little piece of paper that says you can go out and make a career as a lawyer. We can talk about black letter law. We can talk about all these kinds of things. That is the value proposition that's being exchanged between the student through tuition and the school. Okay. Now I think schools are looking at it a little bit differently, exactly along the lines of what you said. What do these young people need? And more importantly, what do the people they're going to help, what do they need? And how do they need it? And what do they need to know? And my last thought before actually answering the question you asked me is recognizing the limitations of law school. You cannot graduate after 3 years, even if you extended law school, and no one's going to do that. You cannot graduate old heads on young shoulders, nor should you try. Right? Law school is you're not supposed to leave law school a fully formed lawyer. I just don't think it's possible unless you make law school almost an entirely co-op system for about a decade, which you could do, but maybe no one's going to do that. For all of that, what I would do is I would rethink the role of faculty fundamentally, because most law schools more or less run the same way as university departments do, which is that our role primarily is to research and publish, because that's my currency, right? If I'm a prof, How often do I get published in law reviews? How high profile are those reviews? How many conferences do I get invited to speak at, et cetera, right? And that's their incentive system. It's as meaningful to them as the billable hour is to lawyers, and you can't fault them for it, right? I would change the incentive system within there to say, yes, there's a role for research. There's a role for thinking about it. But when you see a stat like I saw the other day where something in the range of 40% of all law review articles in the United States have never been cited once, ever, anywhere, right? It just tells you we're spending a lot of time here doing a whole lot of nothing. So I would, and again, this is not to say I would bring in all practitioners, right? And say, I just want, I'm going to bring in someone from the local firm to teach business law. That's not the point either. We don't want to be a trade school. But there needs to be a reimagination of the purpose here. And I think the purpose fundamentally is to prepare people to be professionals in the art of serving people's interests, making the world better for them and for the world around them in law-related and legal coordinated issues. That fundamentally, I think, is what a law school, you're supposed to help people get a good, solid start to their careers. That's what I would try to make a law school be, and I am seeing more schools doing exactly that.
Excellent. Great response. Here's another question that'll lead us to kind of what you're seeing, Jordan. For you, what is the most innovative initiatives that you are seeing law firms doing right now?
Oh, gosh. Wow. On the one hand, I want to say how much time do we have, because the list of innovations in the legal world is extremely lengthy. There's very few firms now where you can point to and say they're not doing anything, right? They have nothing going on. Most firms have at least something. They've got a pilot going on for legal project management, or they are working on some kind of client-facing technology, or they're doing something. Even giving clients a dashboard, which is something clients have been asking for at least 20 years. Right, real-time access to their information and so forth. Just because that example is on top of my head, I think a little bit of Cadwallader out of New York, right, in their cabinet, which is that's not all it does, but it's a whole range of functions that includes that kind of capacity. But when you look at some of the firms that have been consistently in the lead in this area, and again, I'm not by naming a few, I'm going to miss others that I shouldn't. But Brian Cave out of St. Louis, not far from where you are, which is now Brian Cave Leighton Paisner, yep, following their merger with a British firm, which, by the way, 30-second sidebar, Berwin Leighton Paisner itself was an absolute innovator in the UK because they created the first flex lawyer platform called Lawyers on Demand. And they spun it off because it was started with their own alumni and their own associates, right? So BCLP now is doing all sorts of interesting things. Littler Mendelsohn out of San Francisco. Again, it helps when you are primarily they're a labor and employment firm that just do one particular area, but they also recognize, and Ogletree Deacons is the same way. They recognize we're in an extremely competitive market. Our clients are demanding low-priced work for almost everything we do. But we also have access to reams of data that we can use and exploit. And so they built out all of these kind of internal systems, and they give them to clients and say, use this technology. It will help you find litigation hotspots. It will help you identify emerging issues. It can help you identify risk and anticipate it, right? Which is exactly what clients are looking for. For the longest time, I don't know the extent to which it's still a big deal for them, but Seyfarth Shaw out of Chicago was one of the leaders originally in LPM and so forth. And you'll notice, like, I'm not rattling off the AmLaw 10 here, right? Mm-hmm. Or even the AmLaw 20. Because when, if you're Kirkland and Ellis, or if you're Latham and Watkins, or I don't know who else is on the list these days. Well, I do, but I can't. I'm just going to rattle them all off. You don't have the constituency within your firm to say, hey, let's do something really interesting. And if you're number 10 in a market of several thousand, you don't have a lot of incentive to move up higher, right? So, but it always happens. Change never comes from the leaders, right? Revolution doesn't start inside the castle. It's a mistake to always look at the highest ranking firms and say, well, they're not doing much. Yeah, but why would they? It's right. The lower ranked firms, relatively speaking, and by lower rank, I'm not saying lower quality. I'm not saying that at all. But if there's a lot of people above you, a lot of firms above you on the rankings that your people care about, you are incentivized to push up through that list in ways that others are not. Same thing for the law schools too, by the way.
Excellent. And I appreciate you naming a couple of examples. Let's now pivot to something I know it's a topic that you're passionate about. Let's talk about kind of the crisis, or has been the crisis for young lawyers and what they're being faced with. Can you allude to the future of law for young lawyers and law students?
It's funny, Chris. Like literally yesterday, I saw an article online I think it was in The Atlantic, which really summed this up nicely. It was talking about the fact that you see all these reports in the news because the news gets lazy, right? And they say, oh, millennials are killing the dry cleaning industry. Millennials are killing the such and such industry because they're not using it in the ways that we did before, right? And this article said millennials aren't killing the economy. The economy is killing millennials.
Right.
And I think that is absolutely true. Millennials are very much like Gen Xers in a lot of ways. They're very much like boomers in a lot of ways, with one major exception. They are poorer and they are more heavily indebted and they see fewer options and they see doors closing. Whereas my generation, Gen Xers and the ones that came before me, saw nothing but doors opening and paths lighting up in front of them. So right off the bat, never mind the legal side of things, this generation coming into the market and coming into the workforce, coming into society, is terribly burdened, and not just financially, but also with a great deal of doubt and uncertainty. So now you fit this into the legal area. And I have had a number of conversations with managing partners and practice group leaders who have talked about this great difficulty they encounter trying to get their younger lawyers interested in the partnership track, right? To say, they'll approach them for their point of view relatively early on, 3-4 years in, and say, well, what do you think? Are you interested in this kind of thing? And assuming they haven't left by then, because a lot of them do bail out by the second and third year, they're like, nope, thank you. I'm here long enough to pay down my debts a little bit, to get your firm's name on my CV, make a few contacts for my network, and I'm gone. And the funny thing is, Chris, is that it's the mystification with which these practice group leaders and managing partners say this to me. I just don't understand why they don't want this. And I said, because they're not little versions of you. They're not young boomers, right? They're not even young Gen Xers, right? They don't want this. They don't want to work 80-hour weeks, make tons of money, and maybe someday retire so they can putter around the house wishing they were busy, right? That's just not what they do. And it's a failure to understand that. And that's what really kind of bugs me the most. It's the fact this is not a secret. These people have not been dropped upon us, without warning. We have known what millennials are like for at least a decade, if not longer. And yet we still insist on taking all these square pegs, trying to ram them into the round holes of associateship and the partnership track and so forth. And we don't understand why they don't fit. And law firms are losing. I read a piece the other day. A young man here in Canada, he did like a master's thesis on this subject, and he researched the ways in which millennials are just like being essentially thrown away by law firms, not intentionally, but inadvertently, unintentionally. They're just burning through these incredibly promising resources because they cannot find it in themselves, in their structures, to change how they do their work and what kind of rewards they offer to people because it's worked for them so long. They just can't do it. And I think that's a fundamental challenge I'm not sure how to get over.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing. I guess we'll wait and see. Well,
it's going to be, there's only so much time, right? Because again, you look at a lot of these firms, you mentioned like the hollowing out and so forth. Someone said to me the other day, my law firm, not to me, but said to a friend of mine who passed it on to me, our law firm's like a meatless sandwich, right? It's, we've got some people at the very bottom, we got a whole bunch of guys at the very top, but the people in the middle aren't there. Yeah. And increasingly, and again, this is why sometimes I don't think managing partners maybe appreciate this enough, because we think millennials, and people still think, those young, those young people, like 20, 24 and 25 and 26, right? The millennials the first millennials were born in 1980, right? So they're already today 38 going on 39 years old, right? And they're already, they could be partners right now if they wanted to be. They're not young anymore. Right? And they're not going to be young for much longer. They are taking over firms demographically if firms allow them to do so. It is either the inability or the refusal to cede any control of how the firm operates. The last piece of advice I had for law firms in this, I did this and posted a little while ago. I said, give them the steering wheel. Let them drive. Let them take over. Let them put them on the strategy committee. And this nonsense about the 10-year partnership track, the 8 or 9-year partnership track, I said, you're only doing that. We all know you're only doing that in order to extend the amount of time you can leverage them as associates, because as soon as they become partners, they flip over into, profit takers, not profit makers. And I said, if you can't tell within 2 years of a lawyer working for you, if that lawyer will be an owner and a partner someday, then you should be fired from your job because you don't know how to evaluate talent. I think 1 year, frankly, would do it, but I think 2 to be on the safe side.
Jordan, let's have some fun and pivot to the border war topic that our chief and commanding officer, President Trump, has made our lives very interesting with the change of the NAFTA agreement or the elimination of the NAFTA agreement. So you are a Canadian citizen, correct?
Yep, that's right.
And your prime minister hasn't really decided to kind of roll over. And there has been, lots of press, lots of upheaval in multiple economies in different ways. And so our president's picking fights with other countries, and he's also done the same thing more or less with Canada. Mm-hmm. Give me your perspective on this. I'm curious.
Well, yeah, I mean, he has picked fights with any number of countries. Most of them are more important than Canada as far as U.S. is concerned, right? Canada has some strategic value to the U.S., obviously on the other side of a very long, almost impossible to patrol border. I mean, try building a wall along the Canadian border, right? Right? It's even more impossible than building one along the Mexican one. And a supply of oil and so on and so forth. And every so often we send you a pop singer or an actor, and and mostly the ones we don't want. You get Shatner, you get Bieber, fine, you can have them. Jim Carrey, so that's fine. From the United States geopolitical standpoint, it's a much greater concern about what you're doing with like Germany, right, and what you're doing with France, and what you're doing with of course China and Russia. But China's a good example, and this is to talk about the position Canada's in. Yesterday in Vancouver, Canadian police arrested the daughter of, I think, the owner of a major Chinese IT firm. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because I'll pronounce it wrong. Yeah. Huawei, or anyway, there it is, my best shot. Why? Thank you. Even better. See, I knew I'd get it wrong. And the reason we did this was because the United States had issued an extradition request to us to say this person is part of. She's broken the law because her company has done dealings with Iran in the face of the sanctions, and so she's going to be arrested and tried here, and we want you to arrest her. Now, Canada has no choice, right? You have to do that. If an ally, if any country says we need you to extradite someone for criminal processes, we have to do that whether we want to or not, right? Because if you don't, obviously the chances that you'll ever get anybody extradited back to your country drop to zero. But it's a real problem for Canada because, and of course this is like front page, full page news for us here today in Canada, because of course the Chinese government is losing its collective mind. And there's extreme upset. They refer to this as a kidnapping of a leading entrepreneur. And Canada's in a position where, number one, our longest standing, most stable trading partner has turned feral on us and has made us realize we can't be that dependent, on this one company. I mean, Canada will always be dependent on the U.S. There's no way around it, right? That much similarity, that close a border, et cetera, et cetera. So it is absolutely imperative to us. Our geopolitical interests among the very highest are we must maintain good, solid trading relationships with the United States. If we don't have that, we are in serious trouble. And yes, our other imperative is we have to diversify our markets. And the biggest market everybody wants to diversify to is China. And so right now, we're in a position where we've got the world's two superpowers deeply upset with us, right? The American president, insults the prime minister and says all sorts of nasty things about the country to the north. And the Chinese are, talking about, well, how'd you like it if we kidnapped some of your executives, Canada, and kept them here in prison? How would you like that? So and this is a reality. This is the world that if you are not a great power, and there's very, very few of them left, you're at the mercy of what goes on around you, right? And so, we're very fortunate. We're not Ukraine, right? We're not in a country that's going to lose our sovereignty very shortly because of Russian aggression and European and American indifference to it. But we are in a position where this is a rough go. This is a rough period. I'm hoping we get through it. There's that great line from Hunt for Red October. They're on the aircraft carrier, and the captain says, "The situation will get out of control. It will get out of control, and we'll be lucky to live through it." And that's kind of how we're all feeling these days outside the United States.
Let's also venture into kind of the differences between the two countries. Could you elaborate a little bit for my readers? I actually do have some Canadian listeners, but help enlighten the U.S. and kind of United States listeners the differences between Canadians and U.S. citizens.
Oh my gosh! Again, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
It's funny because the one thing Americans so often say to Canadians, you're so nice here, you're so polite, and everything else like that. So, well, actually, I don't think we are necessarily. But then I had a German guy say to me the other day as well, and Germans are incredibly polite. So it's like, okay, well, maybe it's true. You know what? It's colder here, and the winters are longer, and the darkness lasts a bit longer. And, we kind of have to pull together a bit more. And that's my explanation for the fact that we're a squabbling confederacy of people, right? And people in one part of the country, talk dirt about the others at the end of the day. But we are all Canadian, and it's that kind of thing. More unites us than divides us. Which, by the way, used to be something that could be said automatically in the United States as well. And I hope, again, will someday soon. But in terms of the legal system, it's similar in the sense we have there's laws that are federal that apply coast to coast, criminal law, bankruptcy, et cetera, and there's laws which are more provincial, equivalent to states, and that's like family law and and business law falls in two categories. I would say the biggest interesting part of Canada legally wise is Quebec, and the fact that you have a civil law system in place there, which is very similar to obviously based on the European model. Many people there, of course, speak French as their first language and occasionally as their only. There's a real distinctiveness to that, and it's something that makes Canada unique. I once said to an American who tried, they said, "How can you explain Quebec to me?" I said, "Okay, take New Orleans and make it the size of Texas." and that's maybe a little bit, right, what it's like to have a very different, exciting, cool, awesome, but very distinct culture occupying a significant part of your territory and your population. That's probably the best I can offer in that regard. Anyway, it's great here, and it's not always cold and dark. So people should come on and visit us sometime. We're very nice and very polite.
Well, we'll definitely have to do that. Jordan, let's talk about family life. So you're married, 2 kids.
Yeah.
What do you guys do to kind of enjoy life away from business, I would say?
Pure good fortune is that I started working in Toronto in my very 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 brief lawyer career, and also began working at the newspaper. But my first magazine job was actually here in Ottawa because the Bar Association is based in the national capital, and so I moved up here. And then my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we got married. She moved up. We established our family here. And I didn't appreciate, not being from Ottawa or Toronto originally, I didn't appreciate what an amazing city this is in terms of quality of life, in terms of parks and community centers and bike trails and walking trails, and in terms of all the cool things that come with being a national capital, an orchestra and an arts center and a vibrant cultural life and lots of really cool restaurants and what have you. And so I think what we probably tend to do is we take as much advantage as we can of our community. It's a great city. Our kids are both in French immersion schools, so that hopefully they will be fully bilingual, and ideally down the road, I sort of said to them, you know what, Spanish or Mandarin would be my suggestion if you can acquire a third one at some point.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of what we do. We take advantage of the really awesome community we are lucky enough to find ourselves based in.
Excellent. So knowing that you're a writer, I also know that you're a reader. And from talking earlier, may not necessarily be picking up books so much, but help my listeners know kind of your go-to venues right now for reading, and you suggest any stops. I know you mentioned Twitter and blogs. Allude to that some more.
Yeah, absolutely. I have about at least a half a dozen stacked up. I used to have them on my bedside, and then I just felt too guilty, so I put them somewhere else so I don't have to see it and feel bad about it. And you know what? And I should read more outside of work than I do. I tend to take busman's holidays, unfortunately. My biggest hobby is probably geopolitics. My second is baseball, which is good. That's much better. Okay. But I do benefit from reading a whole lot of people who are like these incredibly smart, increasingly young people who are coming into the legal market now in terms of analysis, in terms of observation. So I'll just throw a few names at you. J. U.M., just fantastic analysis, very engaging writer, very engaging presenter. I just love the stuff that she's writing about. I mentioned Bill Henderson earlier from Indiana University. I think he's almost like the most important person to listen to and to hear from and to read in the law these days. I love a lot of what Casey Flaherty has to say. I mentioned Three Geeks a moment ago. In terms of the client side of things, so I love that approach. And gosh, I'm just rattling off some names here. Ivy Gray does some great stuff. She writes a word rake, but she does a lot of stuff about law firm culture as well, which is terrific. Kristen Sunday does great stuff with pro bono. Jason Barnwell, follow him on Twitter as well. He's at Microsoft. Again, the client perspective on things. Lucy Basley, she runs her own operation now. Here's the thing. I follow maybe about 100 people. I follow 100 accounts on Twitter. And about a quarter of those are either baseball or humor. So, so maybe 75 people in the law on Twitter. Honestly, the easiest thing to do, if anybody's interested in this kind of stuff, come into my Twitter feed, look at who I follow, and sort of say, that would be my recommendation. If I'm following them, it's because I consistently get great insights from them, great contacts. Ron Friedman, I forgot to mention Ron a moment ago. Just, these are the people that I would be these people that I pay attention to and that I would recommend you take a look at. And I mentioned Three Geeks, Legal Evolution. Bill Henderson's blog is absolutely a must read as well. So yeah, I mean, and following me on Twitter is not something I recommend necessarily because I'm sure I get tiresome in a hurry. But but what I will do is I will tweet out links to stuff that I think's really important and I think's interesting and worth reading. And so that'll be my recommendation: is drop by my Twitter feed, see who I'm following, and follow them because they're smarter than I am. So listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent list. And so definitely those who are listening, I'll have a link to Jordan's Twitter account. So Jordan, I wanted to ask this question too. Knowing you went to college as literature, you were an English literature graduate, do you have any writing aspirations outside of the legal industry?
That's a really good question. You know what? I way back when, this is back in maybe second year of my undergrad, I said, you know what? I'm going to take creative writing. Creative writing has got so many cool ideas and so forth. And so I took a creative writing course. And you know what? I was terrible. I was just awful. And it's funny, right? Because if I'm writing my blog or running a newsletter or an article and so forth, and I love doing this stuff, right? Nothing turns my crank more than being able to write something and to say what I want to say well. And I can do this for stuff that I know, for the law and the legal industry. I used to be the co-author of a baseball blog a few years back. And again, that was great stuff. But fiction is it's a blank space to me, right? And I have such admiration for the people who can write great fiction, or even good fiction, right? Because you can summon up characters and you can deliver dialogue and you can make all these amazing things. So in one sense, I'd love to be able to do that. I have just zero talent in that direction. The one thing I'm starting to write out a little bit more, and I want to do some more of this, is probably writing a bit more, frankly, about my religious faith.
Oh. Yeah.
About my Catholicism, about what it's like being a Catholic in the world these days, which is an interesting experience. I've started this kind of side blog, which I've only had a couple of posts at it, and I don't intend for it to go really big yet, so I'll have a bit more time. But I think the more often, and with my kids being the age they're at, and they're moving into those years where all of a sudden, they're 14 and they're 11, and suddenly the urgency comes upon you to say, okay, I need to say whatever else I need to say to them, I need to say it soon. Because they're going to stop listening to me for about a decade, if I'm lucky, right? And so part of that is a desire to sort of express those ideas and those perspectives and pass along those thoughts. So I suspect I think I'll stick with nonfiction because that's, play what you know. But I suspect if it's outside of law, it'll probably be on the side of Catholicism, spirituality, that sort of a thing. That's the other main interest of mine.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Jordan. Last question. If you didn't become a lawyer, or a journalist, an author, and speaker, what else would you be dreaming or have dreamed to do as a career?
Oh my gosh, that is so challenging to think about because in a way, the fact that I'm doing this today is because there were. Here's the story I like to tell. And I say this a lot. I'm lucky enough to speak to law students fairly frequently, and I do it as often as I possibly can. And I say, look, I am the poster child for alternative legal careers. But I never intended to be, right? I did not come out of law school thinking, being a lawyer is terrible. I never want to do this. I'll do something else. I came out thinking, okay, yeah, I'll be a lawyer. And I tried being a lawyer, and it wasn't a good fit for me at all. Not at all. I mean, I mentioned I wasn't hired back by the law firm. That was absolutely the right call on their part, right? I would have been a terrible associate. and then eventually would have been an unhappy partner if I stayed around that long. Yeah. So I wandered around for a while, and I fell into publishing, and that kind of led me in a path which led me towards doing the magazine. But again, here's the serendipity of life. The newspaper I worked on was called the Lawyers Weekly. I think it's one in every state or province. And by its nature, it was weekly stuff, right? What's the new case? What's the new legislation? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. Switched to the magazine. It was basically like 6-8 times a year. You can't talk about the latest cases. You have to talk about trends and long-term developments and so forth. And I would have never developed the interest that I have now, the passion I have right now for the business, the market of law, if not for the fact that I kind of fell into this opportunity over there. And again, the fact that I speak now only becomes from the fact that I had managed to write enough that people sort of thought it'd be interesting to listen to. And what I tell students is this: at no point did I ever have a plan that went more than a couple of years. It was not for lack of wanting one. It was the fact I just couldn't put one together, couldn't find the right place for me. And yet now I look at where I am today and look around, and I kind of look back at the path I took to get here. And I said, you know what? I couldn't have ended up anywhere else. And so what I say to students, I said, there's this line from Douglas Adams, who gave us Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but this is from one of his later books, Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, wonderful title. And he said, you know what, I may not have gotten where I intended to go, but I think I wound up where I needed to be. And that really is, that's what I say to students. I said, you know what, you will wind up where you are needed. Just follow whatever is drawing you towards meaning, whatever is drawing you towards resonance and fulfillment and value. That's where you belong. So, if I wasn't doing this now, I honestly don't have a clue, but I really think I wouldn't be as happy, and I really think I wouldn't be as useful as I'm hoping to be. I think I wound up where I needed to be.
Jordan, it's been an honor and pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Chris. It's been an absolute pleasure as well. Take care.
Thank you, everyone who listened to this episode of the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. If you have questions or would like to recommend someone to be on the podcast, please email them to podcast@findthelions.com. That's FINDTHELIONS.com. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Also, please share our podcast with others via email or social media. To share our podcast, listen to more shows, or to read the transcription of this audio, go to liongroup.recruiting.com/podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Leadership Podcast. This podcast is for education purposes only. This content cannot be used for commercial use without written permission from the Lion Group. If you like this podcast, leave a review on iTunes.